Hi, welcome to our presentation. We are going to discuss about the dystopia 1984, written by George Orwell. Our team is composed by Camila Doralicia, Juan Carlos Barranco, José Ricardo Mesura, and me, Omar Martinez. First of all, I will start by talking a little bit about the author. His real name is Eric Arthur Blair. George Orwell is just his pseudonym. He was born in the Indian city Motihari on June the 25th of the year 1903, and he passed away on the 21st of January of the year 1950, when he was just 46 years old, and just 1 year after the publication of 1984, he died because of tuberculosis. He born in India, but when he was 2 years old, he moved to England with his mother and little sister Avril. Talking about his literary career, Arthur produced literary criticism, poetry, fiction, and polemical journalism. But we need to say that he is mostly recognized by his books Animal Farm, published in 1945 at the end of the Second World War, and his most recognized novel, 1984, that is the one that we are analyzing in this occasion. To better understand the importance of his work and his literary career, it's important to remark that in 2008, George Orwell was recognized by the Times as the second most important British writer since the 1940s. His work has still influence among the culture in grammatical side. The adjective Orwellism, that refers to totalitarian and authoritarian social practices, is part of the vocabulary of many English speakers even nowadays. Now, connecting this with the novel that we are analyzing, the adjective Orwellism refers to totalitarian practices because, in his last and most recognized novel, 1984, he writes about the consequences and characteristics of a totalitarian government. It is often linked to Hitler's government on the Second World War, but it is actually based and modeled with the Stalinist Russia, a period of the Soviet Union which is between the years 1927 and 1953, when Joseph Stalin established a totalitarian government, and actually has certain similarities with this novel, such as the forced jobs, the purges, and the political repression of the population, and even that during the Stalin period there were a lot of wars and political conflicts with other countries, such as in the Cold War. 1984 fastly became a classic literary example of political and dystopian fiction. The novel has gotten many awards and recognition with the years. It is cataloged as one of the 100 best English language novels. And with this said, let's pass to the analysis of the novel.
Now that we have seen some of the context of the literary work and its author, we can pass into the details of the story. After finishing the book, there can be distinguished four main stages. The first stage is characterized by the awakening of a strange feeling inside our protagonist, Winston Smith. He forms part of Oceania, one of the three regions in which the world is divided, the other two being East Asia and Eurasia. These three powers are always at war. Oceania is controlled by one and unique party, INSOC, which is ruled by Big Brother, and consists of only 2% of the population for the inner party and 13% for the exterior party. The rest forms part of the proletariat. Winston works as a part of the exterior party, in one of its four ministries, the Ministry of Truth, which regulates every form of media amongst the people. And the main duty of the ministries is to maintain order inside Oceania. There is a very special and severe way in which the regime of the party functions. Basically, if you show signs of individualistic and judgmental behavior that could affect the authoritarianism of the party, you get kidnapped or even killed. In order to be aware of any rebel, most of Oceania is filled with telescreens that record your actions 24/7. Now that this has been set aside, let's go back to our protagonist. As it has been said, since Winston is part of the party, with a telescreen in his house and tons of vigilance at work, he has grown to be exactly what expected, a non-person and someone with no individualistic thought. But as time has passed, the overwhelming situation he has been living catches up to him and starts freeing itself. Later, he makes himself with a journal and starts using it to articulate his ideas. In this stage of the story, he also expresses his concepts about O'Brien, another member of the party whom Winston thinks is also against Big Brother, and also Julia, a girl whom he thinks is part of the Thought Police, which is in charge of locating rebels and getting rid of them. The second stage of the story consists of the release of the rebellion Winston had. At first, it was just thoughts, then ideas embodied on paper, but now it was full prohibited situations. This started when Julia had him a note that said "I love you" in it. Consequently, both of them started meeting each other and having romantic encounters. Winston and Julia also met with O'Brien, who invited them to be part of the Brotherhood, an underground alliance against the party and led by a man named Goldstein. As expected, they agreed and took a copy of Goldstein's book to study. Then, after a few chapters, we get to the third stage identified, where everything collapses. Julia and Winston are staying at a place where they will often meet, when they get arrested by the Thought Police and get locked up. While in prison, Winston gets tortured in several ways by the same O'Brien whom he thought was on his side. And then he faced the Room 101, where he finally failed to stand strong about all his beliefs. And lastly, we get to the last stage, where everything points to the victory of the party over Winston. He is free, but numb again. He has lost his essence. He even meets Julia, but what the relationship had been is over. Then a breaking moment happens. Oceania wins a battle and everyone gets happy about it, even Winston. So that was it. He had been defeated. He loved the party. And as soon as he loved them, as soon as he was cured from the virus of critical thinking and individualistic thoughts, he received a bullet in his head. He was dead. Since now we know overall what the story is about, we can meet the main characters and put them into perspective with their actions during the plot. First of all is of course Winston. He is 39 and has a thin, small complexion. But while in prison, there is a point where he gets fit and also, after being freed, he gains more weight. Just as his physique, his mind also suffered from a roller coaster of changes. It went from submissive to rebellious to miserable and finally to numb again. Either way, the rebellious side of him is the one we can consider as his authentic self. By this point of view, Winston was pretty emotional. He cared about tearing down the party and wanted to try his best effort into learning the aspects of the regime Insel was carrying out. Finally, from all the risks he took, we also need to attribute bravery and courage to his personality. Passing on to Julia. Same as Winston, she faces physical changes when getting out of being held by the Thought Police. She's also rebellious and brave, but when it comes to her enthusiasm about tearing down the party, she was not that interested. She was indeed against the values Big Brother imposed, but if it were her decision, she would have probably not involved herself into the Brotherhood. However, the fact of getting involved reflects on how much she used to care about Winston. The next character is O'Brien. I think there is nothing about this character more important or obvious than his intelligence and great strategy skills. He did not only convince Winston and Julia to trust him, but he also succeeded in to transform by all means a human's values and beliefs. We also have Mr. Charrington. He is the owner of the place where Winston and Julia will hang out the most. At first, we convince ourselves of his good intentions and friendly image. But sadly, just as O'Brien, he is a clear example of not being able to trust anyone in the society they live in, since he was in fact a member of the Thought Police. Another meaningful persona is Goldstein. Even though him being alive is not verified, the whole idea and concept of him led a lot of the aspects from the plot. From what we know, he possesses a very free mind, since he's able to observe what everyone does, but actually being capable of putting it into words and make a sense out of it. He's also a proactive person. I mean, you don't become the leader of a rebellious underground organization by sitting on the couch. To conclude, if we talk about Goldstein, we must talk about Big Brother. He indeed is the whole face of the party. Maybe not the actual mastermind behind it, maybe not even a real person, but he is a reflection of what Oceania and its governors stand behind: power, control, and superiority.
So now that we have seen the plot, the characters, and everything, we're going to see the themes and thesis of the novel. So first we have totalitarianism. In 1984 is a political novel warning readers of the dangers of totalitarian governments. Having in World War II witnessed the horrific lengths to which totalitarian governments such as Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia would go in order to exercise complete control and power, Orwell wrote 1984 to sound alarm for Western nations unsure of how to approach the spread of communism. Thanks to this, we can form the thesis, which goes by all totalitarian governments exercise absolute power over its citizens. Then we have the psychological manipulation. Throughout the novel, the psychological manipulation is a factor that stays from the beginning till the end. Just some examples are the telescreen propaganda, 24/7 surveillance, ubiquitous posters, 2 minutes hate, and the destruction of pleasure. This explains more than anything the thesis, the control of the people is the control of the government, or that everything is in the mind. This meaning that if you have someone controlled psychologically, then you have too much power over them. Finally, we have mutability and annulment of the past. The party manages all data, allowing the Ministry of Truth to change the content of all newspapers, press releases, obituaries, and historical accounts for its own benefits. Individuals are not allowed to keep photographs or documents from the past, and so memories become fuzzy and unreliable. So, with these facts, we can establish the following thesis, which is our present and future can depend on the perception of the past historical events. Now we're going to see the connections of the themes in the guide with the story. From the 5 themes, the 4 that are perceived in 1984 are: first, identities. This theme is reflected in 1984 when the citizens themselves are turning more into objects than they are humans. The citizens in this dystopia seem to lack that makes human unique, our consciousness. I believe that having a conscience, not being able to act on it is far more restricting, as one can recognize oneself not adhering. As a result, they have become mindless drones and lose their identity completely. Then we have human ingenuity. The connection with this theme is focused on technology. This one and advanced technology equipment for the time are always present in 1984. The telescreens are used for continuous surveillance. The speakbright is a tool used for documenting voice and eventually forcing people to forget how to use written language. And there is fearsome machinery and torture devices that inflict pain and suffering upon the party whom the party chooses. 1984 reveals the perspective that technology, though in many ways good, can also facilitate evil. This reveals that attitudes and fears of society at the time Orwell wrote the novel. Then we have social organization. Social organization is a very well present theme in 1984. As the novel begins, we start to get to know the system of Oceania. The main things, such as the fact that the government in 1984 is an authoritarian structure following INSOC, or that Big Brother rules over all, or also that they control thought, language, love, food, war, information, and justice, and all these facets of society through four ministries and strict policy, lead us to the question that if people do really have a role in the system of 1984, other than obey, or if there are any roles, but for one who's leading the power and society. Finally, we have the theme of sharing the planet. The citizens of this dystopia lead an obviously miserable life. Their destiny is basically predetermined, and their available actions are limited. This is why it is connected to this theme. Even though the human rights are less or really none, there exists this peace with Eastchania and inside Oceania. There are not many types of crimes committed, but the ones that attempt to get these human rights as the thought crime, so we can ask ourselves, is peace really necessary with an exchange of many of the human rights of many persons?
Now up to some conclusions. What makes 1984 still relevant? Well, by the time it was written, the mass surveillance technologies weren't as sophisticated as today, but Orwell seems to be on point in this one. Set developments from better resolution to wireless microphones have been easier for, make it easier for state and non-state agents to survey individuals against their will. Furthermore, these technologies can be used for profiling, identifying which individuals are loyal to a government or are potentially dangerous. As you can imagine, since these technologies are still in development and testing, there is a lot of room for error and abuse. And, in most countries, there is no legislation that regulates these technologies. An example would be the CCP social credit system or Israel's surveillance systems, which quite literally profile you the moment you enter the country. Now, there is a documentary on Netflix called Coded Bias, which covers this exact topic. It ranges from hidden racist biases on programs and how there is still no legislation that covers this area, and the fight that there is currently in the United States to make articles to regulate these technologies. However, in the meantime, that means that intelligence agencies and malicious agents are legally free to do as they wish with your data. However, there are some variations. In 1984, the ones being mass surveilled are the upper classes, the upper party. In reality, or in our timeline, depends how you want to call it, mass surveillance has extended to all sectors of society, thanks to the greatest spy gadget ever invented, the smartphone. What does this tell us about the relationship between language and thought? Well, let's first define how the story explores language. In 1984, there is Newspeak, which is a simplification of the English language. Orwell paints it as a backwards trend. However, according to new research, languages do tend to simplify or economize. They become shorter and with simpler grammar. The difference being, however, that the vocabulary in Newspeak quite literally contracts. So, to give an answer to this question, I would like to use my boy Wittgenstein. According to Wittgenstein, language is a tool that helps us interact with the world. So, if the tool is simpler, that would mean that our interaction will be simpler or more limited as well. If the tool becomes too limited, according to Wittgenstein, a language will only be able to give instructions and name things. In other words, only what the slave would need to know. Now, I think that the following quote summarizes the question. The limits of my language are the limits of my world. We perceive our world through language. I know what the color red is because there is a concept red. I know what a bed is because I've been taught what a bed is. But without these concepts, I couldn't really tell them apart. What's the difference between a sofa and a chair if there are no concepts to define them? With a limited language, there comes a limited world, a limited cosmovision, and with a limited cosmovision, you're way easier to manipulate. Well, I think that will be all. Thanks for your attention, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Auf Wiedersehen!